Well, that's pretty cool. I just stood up here and you all got quiet. Yeah. We actually got a couple minutes, but I think, sir, we're ready to get going. So we'll just go ahead and start. So welcome back, everyone. Our afternoon panel's title is Building, Maintaining, and Restoring Infrastructure, Enabling Warfighter Readiness. Leaders will discuss current and future installation modernization initiatives that ensure every installation stands as a reliable and self-sufficient stronghold ready to empower warfighter readiness anytime, anywhere. Our moderator this afternoon is Lieutenant General Retired David Halverson, Chairman and CEO for Cypress International. General Halverson retired from the U.S. Army in 2016 with more than 37 years of service. His last active duty assignment was as Army Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management, where he programmed the Energy, General Services, Force Protection, Construction, and Quality of Life programs for more than 154 installations. He is currently the Chair and CEO of Cypress International, holds a BS from the United States Military Academy, an MS in Operations Research and Systems Analysis from the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School. General Halverson, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Jack. I wish my wife would have been here to hear all that. You know, I get no credit anytime, and I guess it's in that family business. And you know, Omar, thanks for the great speech and stuff like that. And so I was that person that was the two-hatted person, right? That spent a lot of time between Washington D.C. and San Antonio, and then obviously did a lot of the formulations. So it's like anything. I think it is important that you transform and look at yourself and be able to do that. And it was really about empowerment and understanding the tasks that really were at hand. One was you're paying not a disservice, but not providing the full capabilities of a commander there at MCOM, and instead of getting caught up in the, as you know, sir, the day-to-day stuff of the five-sided building that whatever's on early bird becomes the thing of the day, and it consumes you to answer questions and do things. And so I'm really pleased to see the iterations and the maturity and transformation has gone, because it's active people thinking about that. I want to thank Bob and the team here for AUSA to talk about this topic, because it's kind of like Omar says, it's important for us to understand that we all recruit service members and our soldiers and stuff, but we want to retain families and want to make their experience about. And so when you're the Army's home or the military's home, you want that experience from all ends. And we'll talk about family programs, and we've talked about a lot of this stuff, but this interaction is really important for us to have a discussion. Now, this panel we're very blessed because, like you said, we got everyone, Mark here from OSD and stuff that's setting the policy, and really, a wealth of information that he's going to provide from us of what's changing and how they're viewing things, because their new initiatives are going to facilitate some of the things that Omar talked about, what we need to be able to do. And that's what's really important, because there's a physics involved with this thing called installations. And Dave, it's really great to have you on board here, as who is the acting principal deputy assistant to the Secretary of the Army for installations. His maturity and stuff, what he brings. Mark is a Navy person, comes from that eyes. Dave is an Air Force, and then we have Army. This blending is actually very important for us, because you look at things at different dimensions, same facts, but how do you actually apply it, and how do you pass lessons learned from our experiences to do that? Because if this was easy, we'd have solved it a long time ago, right? The factors have changed, things have changed, and I think I'm really excited about what we're talking about, because when you talk about building, capability and sustaining FSRM, this is big stuff, because this is money. This is that business end that Omar was talking about. How do you leverage buying power? How do you leverage relationships to be able to say, when do I buy new? And now that I'm a private person that has to invest and do business, when do I buy new for that investment? So I'm postured for something way out in the future for the capabilities. And one thing that's for sure for us, our Army's changed, right? We do have installations that can't handle the capacity that we need in ranges, right? For things that we have. We have immersion stuff and bring the network to the soldiers and stuff. How do we bring that to make sure that we can optimize all the things that we need to be able to do, so they can rehearse before they go into combat, and to be able to do these things? And then how do we take care of our soldiers so they have the support base they need then to do that, while the soldiers or the service members can focus on their wartime caps and then come back with their commanders that we all want them to do, because the risk of going to war is tough, and we have to be ready to fight and win. So I'm really excited about this. The plan, just like with Dick and the other ones, we want each of the panel members to just, short introductions and then 3 to 5 minutes of what they want to talk about. And then I want, Kevin and stuff to get some good questions and stuff for us from you all. I know I'm falling after lunch, and that's a tough thing. And I always say, hey, all the sinners in the back room, come up front. It's like a church. Come on. But this is a time really for industry to optimize and really ask the questions, because there is no dumb question. I mean, and this is what we want, the power and the expertise we have here on the panel to then give you the best information you have. And that's that transparency we need, because these issues are very tough and it's really important. When you talk installations, there's very little discretionary capability from the things. I remember, back in my days saying, man, I'm paying environmental stuff for sins did in the 60s. But it's just the reality of what that fixed costs and things that we have to do to pay and what's right for us to do. So I'll turn it over to Mark and look forward to it.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Good, awesome. Thank you for that generous introduction. Mark Sinder, I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Infrastructure, Modernization, and Resilience, colloquially known as DASD IMR. Just to orient everyone, if you're not familiar with our organization, my counterparts are DASD Environment, DASD Energy, and DASD Housing, underneath the broader ASD for Installations, Energy, and Environment. We nest right now under the Undersecretary for Acquisition and Sustainment. So organizationally, that's kind of how we fold in. I will highlight a couple of kind of our portfolio responsibilities. There's really two main ones underneath my office. The first is the real property aspects of the Department of Defense, think real estate, just writ large. The second is facility investments, writ large as well. So Milcon, FSRM, sustainment, all those things. In addition to that, we are paying very close attention to things like leasing, things like our global posture, things like our critical infrastructure. All of that is underneath our office from an oversight perspective within OSD. Quickly, I'll touch on right now 3 of our office's priorities. Obviously, we're getting handed priorities on a daily basis right now. I'm sure you've read some of the news. We are actively working a lot of those things, but internally, I'll focus on 3 things. The first is planning, installation planning. If I am going to paraphrase the experts who talk to me on a daily basis, is one of the most important things we can do, period. We are a world-class organization as a department when it comes to operational planning. Our goal is to try to elevate our installations and infrastructure planning to try to match that and bring that up on plane with that level of expertise. That's number 1. Number 2 is data. We have a huge inventory of facilities, installations, properties, sites, locations, not just CONUS, but OCONUS as well. We cannot be agile enough in our investments, in our strategy, in our risk taking if we don't have a good site picture on our data. Data means a lot of things. Data means condition of our facilities. Data means just the physical location of our installations and our property. Data means right now, for example, with return to work, how many places do we have for people to sit? How many people are in those spaces? Are we maximizing the use of our facilities? So we are on a kind of a crash course with speed and energy to see if we can streamline and normalize our data sets that we can all see the same things, all agree on the same numbers, and let that inform both our decision-making space as well as the leaders above us. So that's number 2. Number 3 is speed to execution. The common refrain we hear, whether right or wrong, in particular in our facility investments world, is that we take too long and things cost too much. I have some personal opinions on whether that is true or not true, but I also don't think those things are separate. To me, speed is money. Speed is cost. The faster we can get from planning a thing to acquiring the thing via contract or whatever, to executing and putting shovels in the ground and completing that thing, the closer you can close the gap from start to finish means you're going to do it more effectively, efficiently, and at a lower cost. And so unlocking the mechanisms, whether it's through contracting, whether it's through the planning piece I spoke about, whether it's through the execution of the project or the investment itself, closing that gap from start to finish does generate money in my mind. And that is something we're looking at reforming and unlocking across the facility investments portfolio writ large. And we have we have the support right now. We have an opportunity, I think, in the next 6 months to 12 months to really achieve things at speed in which we may not have been able to achieve in the past. That's exciting for us. It's going to be frustrating, I think, along the way as well, because we're going to be asking for things at a pace and a speed that normally isn't intuitively comfortable. But that's the environment that we're in. We want to capitalize on that to the extent we can as well. So those three things are our office's priorities. Obviously, those are layered and underneath a lot of different broader administration and department priorities as well. But I'll stop there and turn it over to my distinguished colleagues to my right.
Right. Good afternoon. So I'm David Dentino. I'm the Acting Principal Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and Environment. So I get to do this job for 3 more days. Our actual political appointee is going to show up on Monday. So then I go back to just being, David that does installations, housing, and partnerships for the Army. And so I'm one of Mark's service counterparts. And I also work with, one of the other counterparts that he mentioned, which is the DASD for housing in my portfolio. And so within IE&E, within the Army, we're really focused on 2 things, which you've heard a lot about today. We're focused on resilience and we're focused on quality of life. And so why are we focused on those things? Number one, we focus on resilience because that equals lethality. And we have shown, and as Brandon was up here talking about, we are not a sanctuary here in the homeland anymore. When General Jones's DPW folks go out and they're working and they're doing their thing, on the installation, and they're working on those facilities and they're, making that facility run, running that small city every single day. They've got to worry about the physical environment, all of those buildings that we put up. They have to worry about the natural environment, and they have to worry about the cyber environment now. And I was talking with the group earlier today. I was like, it used to be, I've worn this my entire career, right? I've never worn the green uniform. And it used to be, I was always the home station continuity. Suddenly, our civilians are now frontline as well, because through a cybersecurity attack, through potentially drone attacks, through, there's a lot of different means now that our enemies can reach out and touch us. But, one way every single day that, somebody that dresses like me in that Department of Public Works is protecting that installation is through the cyber environment. And we have to make sure that we can do that. And so now, instead of being the back row, I'm not quite the front row, but I'm getting pretty close, right? I'm right behind you. We have got to make sure that we can do that and that we can do our mission. We talked about islands earlier, and this just helps the entire community. So if Brandon mentioned the microgrids, and I can't remember who I was talking to a few weeks ago at Association of Defense Communities, but they mentioned it was a privatized utilities company that comes on, and they built one of the microgrids that we have. And they mentioned that they had lost power outside. The installation never knew it, right? Or part of the installation never knew it. It was hooked up to that microgrid. They knew it because, the lights dimmed and everybody's like, oh, what's up with that? I guess nothing. And they continued doing their mission. So how much easier is it on the outside community as well if they can recover the outside community without having the post breathe down their neck going, power, you promised me power first. So this is where that synergy comes in that Brandon talked about. So resilience is everything from making sure that we get quality power from off installation to make sure that it stays running, that we can run when that power is interrupted, and that we can partner with the community to bring that power back up in the time and the space that it gives them and everybody to react to it. It also means, making sure that our soldiers have the facilities and the ranges that they need. Ranges are just more and more and more important, right? Every single weapon system we get is bigger, faster, louder, shoots further. So having access to a quality range where we can do the multitude of activities that we need to do so that we can train like we want to fight. I heard somebody say this morning, right? I think it was Sergeant Major of the Army Weimer. Right? We want the training to be harder than the fight. And so we need to be able to have the ranges that provide that realistic training scenario. And sometimes that's, multi-domain. It's not just taking a striker out into a field and firing it a couple times. This is maneuver. It's the entire operation and order of battle. And then quality of life, right? And so why am I worried about quality of life? Because that's retention. And quality of life, if I can retain a soldier, how much better is the Army going to be if I retain that experience within the Army? When people are going to hit me, but when the Army first entered World War II, it wasn't the same Army that finished World War II. And the initial days were really rough, but through those experiences, the Army grew that core of NCOs that by the time we got out of Africa and got into Europe, we had that seasoned force. And my job through quality of life is to enable, give the Army the facilities, the infrastructure, and the homes that enable them to keep somebody so that they can become that seasoned force. So that when, the flag goes up, we are responding with people that have that experience that we need. And I do that primarily in my portfolio through the housing. But one of the things that the Army is really latching onto is, quality of life is not just housing. Quality of life is also where you work. And that's the delicate balance that General Jones gets to work with the senior commanders and try and figure out. But the good news is our Secretary of the Army, you heard talk of some of the things that we're doing with the administration. He's ready and willing to try and kick the door wide open for us if we can tell him what help we need. And so he has tasked my team and I to come up with ways on barracks to do it better, faster, cheaper. We are giving them the whole gamut. We are looking at things like acquisition reform. We are looking at things like privatization. And to me, privatization means any time that I as an Army person don't own it, right? So that takes a lot of different forms. Anything from a capital lease to a model like our military housing privatization initiative. So we're putting in front of him, hopefully sometime, he's on the road a lot. One of these days when he's back, we're going to get in front of him with, about 5 options to say, here's some things that you could do to really improve quality of life in barracks and make these things faster, better, and cheaper. So we're looking at all of this again, back to our 2 primary objectives of resilience and quality of life. At the same time, working with folks like Mark, and the beauty of this is, and my secret's, out, right? I grew up in the Air Force, on the Air Force side as a civilian. I could close my eyes in any single conversation I'm in and not know if somebody's not saying Fort Bragg, I could think I'm in an Air Force meeting because the challenges are the same for all of us. None of us have enough money and we're all working the same things. So the beauty of it is I bring a lot of peers with me that I'm really good friends with, and we bounce ideas off of a lot from all the other services, from Mark and his days in the Navy, from my good friends in the Air Force, from their time still in the Air Force. And so we're bringing, I think, a really good, solid, diverse opinion. Anyways, I'll quit there and turn it over to Sergeant Major Galick.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Doug Galick. I'm the Command Sergeant Major for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chief of Engineers. 2 separate jobs, but both positions apply to what we're going to talk about here today. I'll tell you a little bit about what USACE is. If you don't know, USACE, we consist of about 40,000 Department of the Army civilians, SES folks, and wage grade workers, and about 700 people that wear an actual Army uniform. We have 9 divisions all over the country and 44 districts, and that includes 7 center cells and labs. And what these folks do is they do all the military construction and the civil works. Last year, we did about $92 billion worth of work. And what each one of those 40,000 teammates, we promise 4 things is what we do to safely deliver quality projects on time within budget. And that's the way we define success here in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And there's a couple things that we are focusing on now that we can deliver better for the American taxpayer and for folks, and we can improve quality of life, and we can deliver things like that. And that is to ensure that we get the business of the Corps of Engineers right, and we get the engineering right. And what that is for us is that's understanding requirements. We need to understand the requirements, and that goes back to the 1391 process to make sure we're in a position to where the end user or the customer, we really understand what they need so we can give them the professional engineering opinion. Because we've grown accustomed over the past decades to just say yes. The 1391's there, the money's there, yes, we can do it, rather than say, hey, we need to take a better engineering look at this because we don't have the engineering right, we don't have the business right. And what that tends to lead to unknowingly and things we don't do intentionally is that sometimes it puts us in a position where we overpromise and under-deliver. So we need to be able to go back, look at a 1391 and make sure it's mature enough. And a DD 1391 is a Department of the Army form where you request military construction. And that's what we use to view the requirements and understand that we are getting the business and the engineering right. And we're the engineering voice to say, we can deliver this, but we can't do it that fast and we need more money. Or yes, we can. Or at some point, we need to learn how to say no or not right now. Because we have obviously $92 billion worth of work. We're down about 38,000 folks. We look at our program next year that we need about 43,000 folks to do it. So we're already about 7,000 folks short of what we need to do to deliver what we have forecasted for FY25. Looking forward to the questions and the discussion, and I'll turn it over to Jason.
All right, thank you. Hey, good afternoon. Y'all with me? I know it's after lunch and it gets your eyes get a little heavy, tend to be after lunch. But as mentioned, I'm Jason Copeland, and I have the distinct pleasure of being the Installation Management Command Sergeant Major, Senior Enlisted Advisor to General Jones, who you heard from earlier today. And he's kind of outlined a lot of what we do in installation management. But what I wanted to do was first thank AUSA for lending a voice to the senior non-commissioned officers, because we just have just a tad bit different perspective on things when it comes to, as you can see on this panel, we have policy, law, guidance, and then we work with the Corps of Engineers and how they're designing and doing and getting after those things. But it's my organization who's executing that on the ground, who's advising those senior commanders. And I will tell you, if you've never served in Installation Management Command, the passion that our personnel have for what they do each and every day. And as I often say in our town halls, that passion comes from the place of we understand our why. And our why is our soldiers, the families, and those civilian professionals that are getting after it to make all of these things that we hear about throughout the day a reality. So first, thanks to AUSA for allowing me the time to kind of give my perspective on that standpoint. But then also thank all of our partners and all of you that are in attendance today for coming to an event like this. You know, I've been with General Jones for the duration of his command in the 3 years, but being a military police soldier, I've had the opportunity, because General Halverson was my commanding general when I first came into this. So it's interesting that I'm on a panel with General Halverson, and then my CG is sitting here now. So no pressure at all.
Well, that's because you're a CID too. It scared me a little bit.
But, you know, being a military policeman, I started in the Director of Emergency Service, and I've served at each echelon. I was a Garrison Sergeant Major. And you heard about our regions. So I was a region Sergeant Major as well before moving to the headquarters. So over that span of time, I've learned at each echelon what it takes to get the job done, and then really and truly come back to the CG on where this policy is coming out, the guidance is coming out, but more importantly, how are the soldiers going to receive that? How am I educating my fellow sergeant majors and all the way down to those team leaders and squad leaders on what it is that we need to do in order to make sure that you have quality housing, making sure that you understand where your programs and services are, that will take care of your families when you have to go out and do the nation's, business or whatever. So there's a lot that goes into that. You heard about our 4 core competencies. The place that I spend the most time right now. And as you heard from Sergeant Major Sellers about answering the questions on the Army Food Service program, right? Mine is barracks. And that's, I've earned the nickname as Sergeant Major Barracks because I have definitely put a lot of emphasis on making sure team leaders and squad leaders know what it means to do an inspection. We're getting all of the data. We have scorecards now for the barracks. We're getting all of the data. You heard the SMA earlier speak about seeing ourselves. So we're utilizing that data so that we can go back and give our Army senior leaders and everyone, senior commanders that's in that process, the ability, one, to keep their decision space, but two, also they're making informed decisions on their priorities for that installation based on how we're seeing all of those things that are there. So look forward to the panel, look forward to your questions, and absolutely proud to be here.
Hey, thanks. And I appreciate we got some good questions here. A few things that you heard everyone talk about is one is you have to have a common operating picture, understand what the scope of your problem is, so you can make good decisions. That's one. The second thing is just like you said, is what's interesting about the installations. I used to tell this all the time. My best transition I ever had going in from the military into running the businesses was installation management, because you're running the business. I mean, it's very linked to this aspect of business, partnerships, soft power, coordinations, bringing in different aspects, the speed and things like that. But this aspect of it's a business approach, and you're thinking of that, and then how do you train people so when they're, and then I think the last thing is the things just like the Sergeant Major said is how do you change and twist the culture a little bit to our folks and their resiliency and ownerships on things. I just remember when I got out, having lived in military barracks for 37 years, whatever, when I owned my first home, I said, holy shit, this is expensive. When I didn't get my BAH, my wife and I had a whole bunch of things like, hey, you got to fix that. But you look around like, well, I can't call anyone. I mean, then I'm out there doing the time. And then what you found out is you actually had to have a budget that says, hey, how much do I want to do on what we'd like to do and what we can do? And then how do we do it, right? So just times the real property that like Mark has to deal with all the services or Dave or IMCOM, it can actually fills this ownership aspects of how do we train our people to be resilient through their military times, and they're self-confident that they can actually own a home for the first time. But Mark and Dave, this question is kind of to you is, how is DOD and then the Army balancing immediate infrastructure readiness needs with the long-term investments? Because like you're saying, how do you invest now from like what's the right thing for MilCon, and then in the resiliency, particular with constrained budgets and stuff? It's a trade space like anyone, because you can have inner outer growth. How do you work in that, or any guidance you have that you're trying to think through, Dave? I mean, Mark and Dave.
Did we give you that question?
No, this is a question.
Holy moly, that's a tough one. Boy, there's a lot there. So I'll say a couple things, and then David, you can correct everything I'm about to say. The first, I think there is an acceptance and a come to terms moment has already occurred to say that over the last decades, we have taken risk in shore infrastructure, installation infrastructure, facilities writ large. The data proves that out. What you see and feel on a day-to-day basis on our installations proves that out. And so that is a hurdle that we have crossed over in of itself to say we need to all have come to terms. And I think there is largely from the top all the way down an acceptance of that. But to the question's point, the way we are not going to get out of this problem is by plowing more resources in a traditional manner. We can't afford to do that just because the size of the problem is too large. And operationally, from a lethality standpoint, we have to put our resources toward those things first as well. And so I'll give you two examples of kind of where we're thinking of how to crack this problem or crack this nut to solve the problem. And it was mentioned already a little bit on this panel. One is at the local level, it's going to have to be a partnership between the military, the local communities, local industry, state, even to some degree our department brothers and sisters and other departments, to where we team our resources, pool our resources, on innovative ways to become more effective and to get things done faster in order to solve the problems like our barracks, solve the problems like our housing, solve the problems like, and this may not seem as important, but to David's point, where people work is very important to them. And so even our administrative spaces that are in disrepair, we have to keep an eye toward that to make sure that our folks are optimizing their workforce, optimizing their work, and providing for the warfighters what they need. I will say, the fiscal environment is what it is right now, and it's not going to relax. And so to the extent that we can unlock ourselves to be more effective internally and then also partner externally, that is the only way in which we can start to crack the code here in terms of getting to the scale and volume of fixing things that we need to get to as a department. The other area I'll talk about real quickly is we think intuitively about military construction as a solution set. I personally don't see that as the first lever to look for. Facility recapitalization, maximizing the facilities we have today is the opportunity, I think, where we have to focus our attention even more so than we have in the past. Recapitalizing barracks, recapitalizing spaces, recapitalizing hangars, recapitalizing runways, all the things that we have out there that need to be fixed, that can't simply be torn down and rebuilt through a traditional military construction process, is the partnerships that we're looking for from ministry, is the partnerships that we're looking for from communities, is the partnerships that we have to rely on in terms of, again, getting ourselves out of the deficit that we have created over the last couple of decades. Let me stop there.
So I think the best thing we can do, you talked about immediate needs versus long-term investments. Education is the best, most important thing we can do, because we are there, as has been submitted to you, for the senior commander and to enable the senior commander to perform their mission set. So I need to be able to provide that senior commander with the best possible information so that she or he can make the decisions that are going to well outlive them. That we talked about. You worked a MILCON solution for JB Meyer Henderson Hall, and now General Breedenkamp is finally seeing that come to fruition. And the people were patient enough with that solution because we gave them the right data. MCOM has built this great Power BI tool that really helps installation and senior commanders see their installation and really helps focus them on where they need those solutions. But and I'm an engineer though, unfortunately, right? So number one, this is really hard for me up in front of all of y'all having this many eyes on me. But number two is I always want to solve everybody's issue with a model, right? Oh, I can model that, right? This is easy. And this is what the Power BI does in a lot of cases. But then you got to put that, military judgment in on top of that. And it could be that what the model shows me as my number one investment is nearly not the number one investment. And I really need to pull this number 4 investment forward, something along those lines. And I think I really, and I come from another service, but I'd say the Army does really, really good in this area. And I'm completely impressed with how they've done that, because you've got to have the education, you got to be willing to play the long game. But you can't completely sell out the long game for the short game, right? This is a complicated arena we find ourselves in. And then you got to ask yourself, what do we do that somebody else can do better, somebody else can do cheaper than us? And we need to go ahead and get out of those businesses. We need to divest those. And if that's something like housing privatization, or if that's something like an intergovernmental support agreement, we have to be able to recognize those. And that's where the beauty of the centralization really comes in, because chances are if an IGSA is good for one installation, it's also good for another installation. And right now we're pretty small dollars, right? We are saving about $120 million a year through our intergovernmental support agreements and using other agencies and the local cities and communities that surround our installation to do work that we used to do ourselves or that we used to contract out. $120 million in a multi-billion-dollar budget doesn't seem like much, but $120 million, that's another 3 or 4 facilities that I can now renovate to drive down my backlog. So I think between education and understanding what a model gives you versus what it doesn't, and figuring out those areas where we can find others that do things better or cheaper than we can do for ourselves. And then sharing that are two of the keys.
Yeah, thanks. I think like you were saying, looking at that and creating the conditions for people to take the risk on these partnerships, and that's going to be really important. So that's really where commanders and good decision makers can really help. Hey, Sergeant Major Galick, this is a question to you. Given the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' unique dual mission, with the civil works and then military construction, every time I see the Mississippi River, I think of you all. How is the Corps navigating this increase in infrastructure demands at home and abroad?
That's a great question, whoever asked that. Thank you. We are trying to figure out, again, like everybody else, workload management, trying to do more with less, and at some place trying to do more with nothing. But we are focusing on who's doing the work. We have 3 levels of management or leadership in the Corps of Engineers. We have the headquarters level, we have our division level, and then we have what General Graham would refer to as his infantry squads, are the people, our PDTs, our program managers, the folks that are actually down there doing the work. And that is part of the difference between what I do and he does. He's got such a cramped schedule that he ends up like traveling to see a problem or a particular, project for a senator or a barracks that's go bad. I go see the people. So we have 40,000 folks, and we have folks at Lock and Dam number 9 all the way to, some park rangers out at a lake in Texas, because we have 577 locks, dams, and power plants, that we manage. And then we also have 406 lake projects or recreation areas that usually have something to do with help manage, drinking water or flood mitigation projects. So if you think about the Corps of Engineers, manages 52% of the surface drinking water in the state of Texas. And it's pretty hot there. So that's a tough task. So what I try to do is I try to get out and I talk to the people to see what's on their mind, to figure out how we do more with less. When General Graham got on board, he decided we were going to run the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers with 3 things, today, tomorrow, and always. And today is simply deliver the program safely, deliver quality projects on time within budget. But the tomorrow piece is innovate. And we are trying everything we can do to innovate, and we have all the knowledge in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We just got to figure out, how do we get it? We got folks that are actually doing the work, but how do we get these great ideas and these innovative ways, to do things we're already doing up to the headquarters level, where we can operationalize them and make them, pervasive throughout the enterprise. And, we work with our partners at the Engineer Research and Development Center in Pittsburgh, Mississippi, and we're working smarter ways to do things like 3D printing and different materials to build things out of. And then when we get that to a certain level of maturation, that we can enter it in the industry where it's cheaper, or it's faster, or it's smarter to start building with that. But those are 2 ways. But we really want to leverage all the good ideas that are already out there for the folks actually doing the work. But it's hard to take care of those people, and that's the always piece, is taking care of the people, because we're in a talent competition like everybody else. So we struggle to keep our 40,000 folks that are delivering that work for you guys every day.
Thanks, Sergeant Major. All right, Jason, got a big softball for you. No, since you're the Mr. Barracks, no. From your vantage point, and this is, how does the infrastructure challenges, like in the barracks, the training and facilities, and logistics hub, impact morale and retention? So it is about, because like in the barracks now, with the kids, or our soldiers they're much more into gaming. They're all this other stuff that they do. I mean, probably a barracks like my days were different than the barracks that are needed now, right? From that perspective. So,
Yes, sir.
From your vantage point, what are the challenges that you're seeing now, and what's your thoughts on what we need to be able to do so we can deliver the capabilities that the single soldiers need now, for the future, since we're going to try to fix the barracks up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, it's great. I will say what changed in a lot of this is we have effective communication now. Not that we didn't have it before, but we're meeting the soldiers where they are. So we understand the soldiers a lot more. And it's less dictating, hey, this is what you are going to do, and more of, hey, we're going to provide this. So we educate them on how to take care of what we are providing. Mr. Dentino leads a barracks initiative group that we all kind of sit on with a lot of the sergeant majors and me and Sergeant Major Galick sit on there. And so really and truly how we're getting after this is understanding the Army's strategy and the standard for the barracks, what we're going to place in there, and making sure that they understand where we're going to go with this and how much that we can afford to give at whatever, with the resources that we have. No one ever does not want to provide a quality of life commiserate to what they would have on the outside. But at some point, we have to get to a point, and what I spend a lot of my time educating the force on, mainly those junior leaders that are coming up, is, hey, we're going to, at one time I felt like a real estate agent, four bedrooms, 2 bath, an open concept with a kitchen and Wi-Fi and cameras and all kinds of stuff, right? And then, but along with that came, hey, how are we building cohesive teams when we're doing that? So, they have roommates. I just recently went to UTSA in the local area, and we're looking at all the options to get Wi-Fi in the barracks, because, what happened previously is when I moved into the barracks is not what these soldiers need right now. They're educated, they're trying to go to school, and they're in rooms. It's not all about, and I've learned recently, it's not all about the gaming, but we have options that if they are into gaming, that they can still be able to do that. We are giving cooking classes on, if we're going to give you a stove in there, then, hey, we're going to teach you how to cook. We're going to teach you how to be a soldier, but we're also going to teach you the adulting and the life skills that you need in order to maintain all of these barracks. We give them armor, and that's the maintenance application, so that hey, here's what it is that you can reach out to someone to come out and make sure that they're fixing all of the challenges or issues that you have in these facilities. You'll hear a lot about what we're doing in repair by replace to kind of get after, giving them all of those options that are in the barracks, but at the same time, it's saving the Army a little bit of money so that we can build more. We can do more, and we can get those decisions on what places we need to place a lot of those things. So it is really and truly phenomenal to see where we were, because we spoke about it previously, where we were, where we are, and then what the future is going to be. And that's directly linked to retention. That's directly linked to quality of life. And is phenomenal, to see how the soldiers are grasping to that, and they're learning at the same time. But then I have sergeants and staff sergeants and first sergeants now that understand what their duties, roles, and responsibilities are in that, and we can move forward.
Yeah, that empowerment, right, is huge.
Can I hop on
Yeah,
that just
yeah.
real quickly? Yeah, because I was at an installation a little while back, and they were showing me the barracks, right, like they do. And this young soldier, poor kid, right, and walks me with an entire retinue of senior folks and his commander and the garrison commander and everybody else, and we're all piling into this poor kid's room. And but we I was talking to him, and like, hey, what do you think about your barracks? And he's like, I love it. Right, this is great, because it was of course they're showing me one of their brand new renovated barracks. And I said, have you lived in any other barracks while you've been here? He's like, oh yeah, I was in one of the Volar barracks, one of the volunteer Army barracks, right, that we started building right after Vietnam. I said, well, how was that? He's like, well, let's, and he kind of hesitates. And I said, well, let me ask you the question a different way. Does the fact that you moved out of that and into this new barracks, does that have any impact on your decision on whether or not you plan to re-enlist? And he's like, well, he hesitates again. He says, let me put it this way. Living in the Volars, really glamorized getting married. So So we need to enable kids to make good decisions, right?
That's good, Dave.
And part of this is providing them, and meeting them where they are. I talked to my dad, and he's like, kids, you all suck, right? You need to know what's good for you. But, the Secretary of the Army just signed out a new 2-soldier per room barracks policy. But this isn't your grandfather's 2 soldiers per room. There's no bunk beds, there are 2 beds side by side with the sheet down the middle. You may share a room, but there's a partition wall between where the 2 beds are. So you still have a modicum of privacy, and you can still do your homework, or you can still talk to your girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever you want to do with a modicum of privacy, but you always have that battle buddy there with you. And so we're really blending the old and the new and where we're going forward. And I think the Army's doing a good job with that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, go ahead, Sergeant Major.
I was just going to add one comment. And, the interesting part about the a barracks design that he just spoke about is that was designed by senior sergeants majors. So that barracks design that got approved was designed by people that actually lived in barracks, spent time in barracks, went through barracks, inspected barracks, took care of the soldiers that was in the barracks. And that goes back to just the great Army leadership that we have right now that brought senior enlisted non-commissioned officers into the process and let us actually help solve a hard Army problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So good.
wouldn't let us leave until we
Yeah.
came up with a solution.
Yeah, soldier touch point. I just remember when Admiral Mullen, chairman, they tried to show him a barracks one time. He goes, "Man, you Army guys live pretty good compared to us on the ships." so it is a perspective and stuff. But that's really good. You had soldier touch points on trying to figure that out and come to solution sets, which is really good. Hey, Mark, this is probably for you. And we've had this discussion. They probably want to hear from the OSD perspective. How do you see this, the nuclear micro reactor SMR type at installations? And what policy or congressional help do you need, or if anything, do you see that, especially for critical infrastructure or critical things that are needed or far away places? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that kind of gets back to some of the things we talked about already. SMRs is one example. There are numerous examples where there is a partnership. I know where the department and the places we are, with the things we need, power, water, et cetera, utilities for, and with the space we have, where we can and should partner with industry, with the local communities, to allow a win-win situation for everybody. SMRs is a good example where if we want to expand our ability to be resilient, to grid ourselves, to island ourselves, you would intuitively think SMR is a perfect opportunity for that, and it is. But think about if we want to advance our posture on AI, on data centers, on things like that, where you're consuming or want to consume significant amounts of power, water, et cetera, SMRs is placed into that too. And the examples kind of unfold themselves if you start to expand your thought process on where we can capitalize on both the resiliency of alternative power solutions like SMRs from the traditional grid, as well as partnering with expanding our capabilities that benefit us, but also allow for investment in our installation facilities to help recapitalize some of the infrastructure that we have neglected in the past. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, where we are, what our thought process is.
Thanks. That's this is to anyone and stuff. There's a lot of how is the Army leveraging emerging technologies such as the digital twin, predictive maintenance, or smart installations to enhance their infrastructure management or operational efficiency? Or Dave and the Sergeant Majors, what if you've seen anything? Dave, do you have any thoughts on that from a technologies perspective that we're trying to do for the installations?
Yeah, Brandon talked a little bit about, the question was asked earlier about Internet of Things. So I think, if the technology is there, if you have a Nest thermostat in your home, right, you're part of the Internet of Things. And so how do we grasp that and put it into our facilities? And I think, again, this is where the power of centralization comes in, because we have a lot of installations that are out there doing this, and they're doing it on their own. But how do we make sure that this is, can become an enterprise solution? And that's where General Jones and his team come in, is taking the lessons learned at different installations and doing that. And on another aspect of this, we see our privatized housing providers taking advantage of AI. They are through AI, they are evaluating, how they are, the houses that people live in, number one, and number two, the maintenance work order process. And they can dig in and they can see, what types of maintenance work orders they have so that they can do some predictive maintenance. Number two, are they having callbacks in certain areas? And that may be because of equipment. That may be because of a technician even, right? And what if you have a technician that keeps getting called back? What does that mean, right? It doesn't mean you should fire the technician necessarily. Maybe that means that technician needs a little more training, or maybe that means that, there's something else going on. But because they're a for-profit, company and they're a business, we talked about, the business partnerships, they are really all in on this because we have talked about the fact that, a lot of the homes, especially our old historic homes, the BAH does not equal what it costs to maintain that home. So they have to do what they can to make sure that they are minimizing their costs. So they are very, very incentivized to use things like AI and their data analysis to make sure they understand the issues that they're seeing.
Yeah, thanks.
So I will tell you, we utilize AI to its fullest capacity in Installation Management Command. From our housing, every Monday we have housing meetings where we have now come to the point where we're briefing off of Power BI and scorecards for all of our houses. So you think 100,000 homes throughout the Army, right? 10,000 belong to the Army, and then the others belong to our housing partnerships who do a phenomenal job. Living in housing for a long time, they do a phenomenal job. But we brief on Monday. We've now brought in the barrack scorecards that mirror what we do for the housing. So, and then if you look at what we do for our facility investment plan, our FITWA tool, which is the facility investment plan, war game analytics, right? So we can see real time what is out there, where we're having the most challenges with a lot of the maintenance and all of the things for the barracks in particular. How many service orders are we getting through ARMA that goes out so we can get ahead of the bang on HVAC issues that we're going to have? We know in the Southeast, the CG says it all the time. It's like Christmas, right? We know in the summertime, we're going to start seeing challenges with mold. Are we educating the soldiers on, the HVAC systems and how they're utilizing it, not opening their windows and all of these kind of things because of the moisture getting in there? But we visited it over in Korea where they had a DPW command center where they were looking at all of the infrastructure on Camp Humphreys, and they could be able to tell you and pinpoint buildings that were having problems and where they were having problems. And the system could, even if we didn't have parts on hand, the system would already go ahead and start ordering that part. So when the technician went out there, they would have the part to go out there and then they could tell what was going on. So we are evolving. We're going to get there. And a lot of this is through our partnerships, right? We're learning from industry. We're learning from the people who are on ground trying to do the work with our soldiers and families that are out there. So we're not where we need to be with it, but there's a lot of things that I think in the coming years we'll see. We'll ask a lot more questions and see how we can start getting ahead of a lot of the things that are happening out there. So because we already know through learning where we're going to start seeing a lot of the problems in our hot areas and all of those kind of things. So
Hey,
That's how we-
Sergeant Major Galick and Sergeant Major Copeland, I got one. I just want to know, is this fake news or not? Because it's a question. Can you tell us about the new barracks that were 3D printed at Fort Bliss? And how does that create efficiencies with creating new barracks, and have soldiers moved into the barracks? I don't know if it's fake news or not. That's why I said that's a du jour thing nowadays.
so-
Is it real?
It is real.
All right.
No, the Corps of Engineers did not do it.
Okay.
There was some issues with, the buildings just because they were printed, but there was a seismic testing issue just because of where they were printed, but they're working through the issues, and there is going to be like 3D printed structures of that size. I know the Corps of Engineers, our ERDIC folks are 3D printing smaller structures. We 3D print larger things too for like the civil works side of the house. We can we 3D print like huge gears for our locks. You know, rather being some of these locks were built 100 years ago and the prints don't exist. So we'll send a piece of the gear back and they'll recreate the whole gear. It's pretty amazing. But there are actually 3D printed barracks at Fort Bliss, and I anticipate sometime there'll be people in them. I'm pretty sure.
So they're collective training barracks. You know, it's not a permanent party barracks. And so, yes, there will be people in those barracks. They've been 100% cleared for occupancy. 3D printing is a great technology. You got to know where to use it though. And that's the next thing we did a concept through the barracks. Why? Because we have a lot of barracks money. That's why we chose a barracks. It probably wasn't the best example that we could have done, because there's definite limitations to what 3D printing can do, right? 3D printing can build you the walls and it can build you the supporting infrastructure, but it can't do the roof. It doesn't obviously put in any wires. It's the infrastructure, it's the envelope that goes around it. So think to yourself, what do we have where we need an envelope that's, really structurally sound, that's strong, and it's going to last a long time because it's solid concrete. Where could we use that? We've got a lot of places where we could use something like that with warehouses, with equipment maintenance facilities and other types of facilities like that. And I anticipate we'll see this even more. We're especially interested in it in hard to get to places where you need replication. So think places like Kwajalein, think places out in the middle of the Pacific. So there's opportunity there that we're just starting to tap into.
Well, thanks. Obviously, what we want to do now is, end the kind of thing. I think we got, is it 4 minutes or so time? Oh, you gave me some extra time. That's good. So I'll have one more question. One of the things here is one of the things I saw when I traveled one time was to Israel. Right, I went to Israel and they were having problems. This is the early days when a lot of things were going into the cities and stuff like that. And what happens that they move all their headquarters into a smart city, right? They moved everything south, and they then created this smart city where they consolidated everything, the joint aspect of it. So that it's very interesting for us from my aspect of looking at it. So they could start new with all the technologies and stuff we had to create these things with efficiencies built in with things. I know that's kind of like what you all do at the thing is how you do a pilot with the kind of understanding what it would be. And so it's kind of linked, is there a BRAC or is there this thing? So in the viewpoint, do you see that in the future? Are we going to be able to build a new post, or it's always going to be where the posts are, right? And then we build up the structure to gain the efficiencies and the effectiveness that you'd want, just like Israel did to move into places that had the water, had all the things that the early pioneers doing when they went to Fort Sill or something, because they knew exactly, it had all the basis they needed. It had the limestone to build the homes and all those types of things. Are we thinking in that, Mark? We just holding what we got and then dealing with the excess infrastructures and stuff?
Yeah, I'm gonna pivot on that question a little bit. The answer is yes to all. When it comes to identifying excess capacity, underutilized capacity, opportunity to co-locate or relocate, all of those levers have to be looked at and pulled where possible and if able. But also it's really dependent on, the operational focus, right? Making sure that we have the right stuff and the right people with the right things in the right spots. And that is what will drive and ultimately inform anything that is future in terms of relocating or looking at different ways and places to do things. I'd offer also, but that gets back to the kind of one of our priorities as well, like the master planning aspect, the planning aspect that allows you to look at and plan and forecast where your things are going to be and when you'll need them to be there really is the foundation for all of those things.
I agree. I mean, so first of all, hey, let's give a big hand to the panel right here. Yeah. I really do appreciate it, and there's a great blend and stuff. And so thanks very much. Any closing comments, Mark, Dave, Doug, and Jason? Yeah.
I'll just say thank you very much for having me here. Also, we are open for business. So if you can, my contact information's out there, you know, someone in our office and you got ideas, things, questions, concepts, concerns, you can email me directly anytime. And so, yeah, that's, again, thanks for having us here and appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, just want to say thank you to AUSA for doing this. This is a great opportunity for us to get together. Like Mark, yeah, if you bring your good idea fairies to us, and we'll try them on for size. Because like you were talking, I don't think we need to build a new city. Right? There's a thing called adaptive reuse that we need to get better at. And through adaptive reuse, we're going to be able to really, I think, do some interesting things and bring technology to our older facilities through that process. But on top, thank you everybody for being here. Hope everybody has a very, very happy Easter. And again, bring us your good ideas.
Yeah, thanks. It was a great opportunity to be here to represent the Corps of Engineers. I can just tell you the Army and our nation count on the Corps of Engineers to do hard things. And generally, when you look at things, you think of us picking a bridge out of a water or recovering some aircraft, but they don't really, building barracks and keeping the Mississippi River where it's at, because that's where it's supposed to be, because that's where we determined it. We don't talk about those type of things, but you just know you got 40,000 great men and women that work for your U.S. Army Corps of Engineers out there working hard every day, trying to spend American tax dollars wisely, because that's important, and working hard for our Army. So thank you very much.
All right. So thank you for this forum. Thank you for this ability to speak today about installations, because I think this is an important topic, but I'm biased. And just know that your Army is strong. We will be stronger. And everything that you hear about, oh, the next generation is not, they're not going to be able to do this and not going to be able to that. Count that as white noise. Those soldiers, I will tell you these next generation of leaders are going to be phenomenal. And all of the things that we're bridging the gap between what they are accustomed to in technology to what they're going to do on the battlefield. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. Thanks for your support from the community back onto the installations.
All right, thanks very much. Well,